Development Part 2. In the first part, we looked into the meaning of development in different contexts and India's attempts in development process. In this second part, we'll take a look at different development models, process of development and cost of development, and we will also attempt to arrive at a picture of an ideal development situation. There have been different development models, and the critics of development have pointed out that the kind of development models which have been adopted in many countries have proved very costly for the developing countries. The financial costs also have been enormous, putting many countries into long-term debt cycle. For example, Africa is still suffering from the enormous debts which it ran up by borrowings from the richer countries. The gains in terms of growth have not been commensurate, and the poverty and disease continue to plague the continent. The social cost of development is a vital aspect, and in India, the dam projects have threatened the life and livelihood of people who live, for example, in the Narmada Valley. While the building of dams do have benefits, for example, flood control, river navigation, etc., but at the same time they are taking away the homelands and food source of the people. Construction of Sardar Sarovar Dam displaced lakhs of people and it affected their livelihood. Surely, building such dams have a beneficial purpose, but at the cost of displacing many people and drastically affecting their lives. Moreover, such projects destroyed the environment as well. They created a soil erosion. For example, species extinction took place, and there was a spread of diseases also. In the dam reservoirs in tropical areas, due to their slow movement, are literally breeding grounds for mosquitoes, snails, flies, and the vectors that carry malaria and the river blindness. Scale of this problem is enormous. No one can say how many people have been displaced by dams, and dam builders have not kept the count. And once displaced, they become politically invisible and disappear into masses of urban poor and landless. A conservative estimate of the number of people displaced by the dams in the past 50 years is supposed to be 50 to 60 million people. In India alone, more than 20 million people are supposed to have been displaced in the past 4 decades, and it has been estimated that as many as 75% of these people have not been rehabilitated. Most of this population belongs to indigenous communities like tribes, Adivasis, etc. Moreover, numerous case studies have demonstrated that forced displacement tears apart communities and disperses fragments and disrupts patterns of social interaction and interpersonal ties, and it destabilizes and creates a useless integral reciprocal help networks, and it scatters kin and other social groups already existing. This dismantling of social ties may leave the individual people physically intact, at least in the short term, but it destroys communities. There is a widespread helplessness and loss of cultural identity that compounds the loss of natural and man-made capital as well. The environmental cost of development, therefore, is huge. Technology leads to speedy developments and changes, but at the same time, technology gobbles up resources very fast. It means that the depletion of raw material is also very fast. For instance, if whatever cotton produced in 1 year is consumed by a textile mill, in 6 months, what would happen? The workers would have nothing to do for the rest of the year. If cotton is grown in larger areas where some important crops such as wheat and rice are grown, there will be increased production because of which cotton fulfills the needs of the textile mill. But there will be a decreased production of food crops. Now further, let us take an example of forests. In olden days, cutting of tree was done manually. These days, machines are used for this purpose. Hundreds of trees can be brought down in a day. Unless there is a balance between the reforestation and felling of trees, there will be no forest left on this earth, and it will spell doom on the environment. This has happened in the large tracts of Amazon, where rainforests are being deforested. That has been done in order to provide for the increased consumer needs. Coal and petroleum reserves are the products of millions of years of natural processing of dead trees and fossils. The manner and the proportion in which these resources are presently being exploited and used up, we will be left with nothing of these in a couple of 100 years. Developments in medicine and surgery have ensured greater chances of survival and prolonged lifespan, but there has been no corresponding reduction in birth rate. As a result, there has been a steady increase in human population, which has led to a corresponding increase in the consumption of global resources and greater exploitation of the environment. We humans have already started facing the consequences. When tsunami hit the South and Southeast Asian coast a few years back, it was observed that the destruction of mangroves and the building of commercial enterprises along the shoreline was the reason for the greater extent of the damage that was caused. Similarly, global warming is leaving a disastrous effects. The ice in the Arctic and Antarctic is melting because of increased emission of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, and this has the potential to cause floods and actually submerge low-lying areas like Bangladesh and Maldives. Now let us see how to assess the development. It could not, of course, be said that the development has had only negative effects in the world. Some countries have had some success in increasing their rate of economic growth and even in reducing poverty. But overall inequalities have not been seriously reduced, and poverty continues to be a problem in the developing world. Economic growth is the most powerful instrument for reducing poverty and improving the quality of life in developing countries. But under different conditions, similar rates of growth can have very different effects on poverty, the employment prospects of the poor, and the broader indicators of the development. A successful strategy of poverty reduction, therefore, must have its core measures. That is, to promote rapid and sustained economic growth. Asian countries are increasingly tackling this agenda of inclusive growth. India's most recent development plan has two main objectives, that is, raising economic growth and making growth more inclusive. The same policy is mirrored elsewhere in South Asia and Africa as well. Many developing nations are in debt and poverty partly due to the policies of international institutions such as the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. Their programs have been heavily criticized for many years for resulting in poverty. In addition, for developing or third world countries, there has been an increased dependency on the richer nations. This is despite the IMF and World Bank's claim that they will reduce poverty. It is now increasingly being recognized that there is a need to adopt a broader notion of development. An excessive focus on economic growth has not only given rise to a wide range of problems, but even economic growth has not always been satisfactory. Hence, development is now being viewed in a broader terms as a process which should improve the quality of life of all the people. One such attempt is the Human Development Report, which is annually brought out by the United Nations Development Programme, that is UNDP. UNDP supports national democratic transitions by providing policy advice and technical support, improving institutional and individual capacity within countries, and it also attempts to educate populations about democratic reforms, promotes negotiation and dialogue, and it shares the successful experiences from other countries and locations. This report ranks countries on the basis of their performance in social indicators like literacy, education levels, life expectancy, maternal mortality rates. The last decade saw the convergence of Human Development Indicators, that is HDI values globally, although progress was uneven within and between the regions. Developing countries' transformation into major economies with growing political influence has impacted human development progress. Now, projections in the 2013 report of the HDI suggested that by 2020 the combined economic output of three leading developing countries alone, that is Brazil, China and India, will surpass the aggregate production of Canada, France, Germany, Italy, the United Kingdom and the United States, which are the developed countries presently. This shift has related to trade and technology partnerships between emerging economies. However, economic growth does not automatically translate into human development progress. So reports have highlighted the need for pro-poor policies and investments in capacity building with a focus on education, nutrition, health, and employment skills. The 2013 report identified 4 areas of focus for sustainable development. They are enhancing equity, including the gender dimension, enabling greater voice and participation of citizens, including youth, confronting environmental pressures and managing demographic change, and also help poor people build sustainable livelihoods. But the development has its own limitation as it taxes highly on our environment and in turn humankind, as said before. Moreover, in the race of materialistic development from the centuries, most of the countries, both democratic and dictatorial, have sidelined the actual implication of such developments, that is, dams, factories, buildings, etc., on the common man. Developments have thus become a process designed and implemented by the ruling sections, that is, in the country, which have also often been major beneficiaries of the development projects. This has underscored the need to think alternative ways of understanding and pursuing development which are equitable and sustainable. What is sustainable development? Sustainable development is a process that envisions a desirable future state for human societies, where living conditions and resource use continue to meet human needs, but that is without undermining the integrity, stability, and beauty of natural biotic systems. In a democracy, everyone needs to be involved in formulating the goals of development and in devising ways of implementing it. Even though the plans are made with the best intentions, they lack detailing of specific needs of the people around. In the democratic setup, the local bodies are functioning to ensure the participation of local people in decision making. To ensure more sustainable model of development, one had to advocate that this system of local participation is more effective. Involvement in planning and formulating policies also allows people to direct resources towards their needs. Where road must be laid, what should be the route of the metro or local buses, and where a park or a school should be located, or whether a village needs a dam or an internet cafe. Such decisions must be taken by the people concerned. A decentralized approach to development makes it therefore possible to use various kinds of technologies, that is, traditional and modern, in a creative manner. Efforts should also be made to conserve natural resources and use renewable sources of energy as far as possible. Few such examples are rainwater harvesting, solar and biogas plants, microhydro projects, compost. Such activities are possible only by the active participations of the local people. Thus, a sustainable development model demands for more and more involvement of the common man. So, what is the conclusion? To conclude, a sustainable development requires that we see the world as a system that connects space and a system that connects time. And when we think of the world as a system over the space, only then we grow to understand that air pollution from North America affects air quality in Asia as well. Same way, pesticides sprayed in Argentina could harm fish stocks off the coast of Australia. In this context, we should start to realize the decisions our grandparents made as to how to farm the land, and these things will affect agricultural practice today. Similarly, the economic policies we endorse today will have an impact on urban poverty when our children are adults. We also understand the quality of life is a system too. It's good to be physically healthy, but what if we are poor and we don't have access to education? It's good to have a secure income, but what if the air in our part of the world is unclean? And it is good to have a freedom of religious expression, but what if you can't feed your family? So the concept of sustainable development is rooted in sort of systems thinking. That is, it helps us to understand ourselves and our world. The problems we face, therefore, are complex and serious, and we can't address them in the same way we created them. But we can address them by working collectively. Keynotes to remember in this essay are: critics of development have pointed out that the kind of development models which have been adopted in many countries have proved very costly for the developing countries. Moreover, such projects destroyed the environment, they created a soil erosion, species extinction, and spread diseases. The result is widespread anomie, insecurity, and loss of cultural identity that compounds the loss of natural and man-made capital as well. Technology leads to speedy developments and changes, but at the same time, technology gobbles up resources very fast. It means that the depletion of raw materials is also very fast. For example, because of global warming, the ice in the Arctic and Antarctic is melting because of increased emission of greenhouse gases. Economic growth is the most powerful instrument for reducing poverty and improving the quality of life in developing countries. UNDP supports national democratic transitions by providing policy advice and technical support, improving institutional and individual capacity within countries, and educating populations. It also advocates for democratic reforms, promoting negotiation and dialogue, and sharing successful experiences from other countries and locations. A decentralized approach to development makes it possible to use various kinds of technologies, that both traditional and modern, in a creative manner. Therefore, efforts should also be made to conserve natural resources and use renewable sources of energy as far as possible. The concept of sustainable development is rooted in sort of systems thinking. It helps us to understand ourselves and our world. The problems we face are complex and serious, and we can't address them in the same way we created them, but we can address them by working